Okay. Recording in progress. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. If it's your first time here, thank you for coming, and everyone else, welcome back. Let us know where you're coming from. Drop it in the chat. I'm Anna Brazaitite. I'm the Education Director at Christina T. Sustainable Jewelry Consulting, where we provide strategy, guidance, and education on responsible sourcing and sustainability for the jewelry industry. If you'd like to find out more, you can check out our website. It's christinatmiller.com. This is the living room. It's an informal virtual hangout to support community and connection on issues related to responsible sourcing in jewelry. We cover different topics every month, and we love to hear from you, so you can feel free to share any feedbacks or topics that you'd like to discuss in the future using the form on our website that we'll drop in the chat. So thanks to everyone who showed up to have this conversation, and those of you that have contributed with the pay what you want option. We're really happy to be able to provide these sessions for you. So thank you for helping make that possible. A little bit of housekeeping. We're recording this session, so this video will be in the public realm. You're, of course, welcome to speak up and ask questions. You can also put them in the chat, but when you're not speaking, please stay muted. If you're private messaging, keep it kind. You should be respectful of participants' privacy and personal space. And again, any questions or comments you want to share, go ahead and use that chat function. If you want to stay up to date with Christina Miller consulting happenings and events, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. We'll put that link in the chat as well. Our next living room session will be on November 19th, where we will continue looking at particular ASGM projects happening globally. So we'll share more details later, but we'll take a deeper dive into some specific projects. And feel free to let us know if there are any projects that you'd like to hear about at that next session. So now I'll hand it over to Christina.
Thanks, Anna. I'm going to let everyone know something lovely is happening in the property next to where I am. They're planting 2 large ginkgo trees on a tree-lined street, so they're putting some trees back. But it's kind of loud, so I'm gonna, if it gets too annoying, I'm gonna turn off and we'll shake up the conversation in a different way. So we also wanted to let you know that our next living room session to emphasize is in November, is going to be on November 19th. Again, it's the 3rd Friday of every month. And for this one, there are a variety of artisanal and small scale gold projects aimed at bringing responsibly sourced gold to the community all around the world. And what we're interested in the November session is to bring some more of those particular specific projects to this group so that you can learn more about them on a level where they're kind of introducing themselves and what they're working on. So if there is a particular project that you've heard about, this is in addition to Fair Mind, in addition to Fair Trade. Today, we're going to be introduced to Zahabu Safi, but there will be others. So if there are some projects and programs you're interested in and you'd like to put them in the chat, we're working on building that November session. It will be the last session for us for 2021. We won't have a session in December. So we're hoping to make it one that helps you end the year on a note of awareness of all kinds of things that are going on in the space of artisanal and small scale gold mining. So because these events, these living room sessions are recorded, we like to provide, even though a lot of the people that are on are already well aware of artisanal and small scale gold mining, we like to provide a bit of a background for folks that are potentially new to the topic and or come and watch the recording at a later date and are new. So artisanal and small scale gold mining, to keep in mind, the artisanal, you can kind of imagine, is often done hand tools, very limited amounts of mechanization, sort of the opposite of industrial. And small scale is already marks a phase where there is a little bit more industrialization, meaning more machinery, sometimes including using chemicals like cyanide to process the material, versus in a lot of artisanal sites, mercury is kind of the more common material used. So we'll get back to that, but it accounts for about 15% of all gold production, comprising 80% of those hired, employed in the gold mining industry. So kind of in a way to think about a contrast between industrial scale mining might produce more of the gold globally, but it is a smaller amount of the overall workforce. And this is individual lives that are impacted, both that of the miners, as well as, change the view here, sorry. It affects the lives of the miners as well as all of the people that rely on the mining operation in their communities, and as a trickle effect. So you can think of the mining operation occurring in a specific site, but it influences the communities that it's around. It creates opportunities for marketplaces and other economic activity. I'd just like to ask, it seems that there might be someone on who I would prefer if you could check to see if you could mute yourself. We are hearing some background noise and it's not from one of the presenters. So just if you could all take a moment and check your, that would be great. Okay, excellent. I think we're good. So think about the opportunities for economic growth that supporting artisanal and small scale miners can provide. And the gold, that has been mined in this fashion, gold in general, has held cultural significance for millennia. And there's an area that we highlighted in the past on one of our programs, and we were looking in depth at the Chocó region of Colombia, where it's in some ways a better story now than how the group came to be there, but African slaves were brought to coastal Colombia along the Pacific coast, and they brought with them gold mining expertise. And today they operate very much in from an indigenous mentality, in that the gold mining that they do intentionally leaves gold behind for future generations to be able to source that material. So you can check out, it's a nice program that we did a living room session on, and you can find that on our website. One of the things I'd like to do is, find out from all of you, and feel free to use the chat, but as you're learning more about artisanal and small scale gold mining, what have been some of the things that have surprised you, or, maybe you weren't aware of when you first heard about it, some of the complexities? And, Anna, who's here on our team, there were moments where you had to kind of take stock that maybe, your ideal, sort of this idea of really helping and investing in people, came with a need to recognize why you're investing, because you can be part of a change that's a little bit more complex. So if you could talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Christina. So yeah, I feel like I'm still new in this space. I really dove in a couple years ago at the Chicago conference. I see Susan here, shout out for the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference. So I went to that in 2019, and that was kind of when I started learning about all of this, right? For me now, it's about understanding the big picture, right? Both the opportunities and the challenges, and always trying to move forward along this spectrum that I picture. That's on the one side, you have things that do harm to people and the environment, and on the other side is a positive impact and creating benefit. So for me, it's always trying to move toward that more positive end of the spectrum. And I love how Christina always says, we have to have an appetite for complexity. So when I first learned about the challenges, I was definitely thinking in a less nuanced way. How mercury was even a part of the process of gold mining was new to me a couple years ago. And for anyone who doesn't know, whether you're watching this recorded and you're new or anything, so mercury is introduced into the gold ore that's mined, and the gold particles combine with it, forming what's called an amalgam. So then the mercury is burned off, leaving behind the gold. The fumes that this creates are very toxic and can cause serious health problems. And mercury contamination in general, can enter the soil and water near mining communities. So as a result, ASGM is actually the largest human-caused source of mercury pollution. So learning that, seeing there's this really big issue that we're, talking about at this conference, where there's so many smart people and so many people who care and are making a difference. Back then, I was expecting to just have a clear answer, like, here's a big problem and here's the solution. But what I've learned since then is that the solution is a process, right? That we all get to be a part of creating that solution. And that's why we have to stay engaged. It's about pushing forward toward those better practices. And the key is supporting artisanal miners and supporting the initiatives that are helping them transition to mercury-free methods, which are not only safer, but more efficient. So we don't want to let the fact that, say a certain mining co-op isn't mercury-free yet, we don't want to let that keep us from supporting the other development in that community and from giving them the support that they need to reach that improved state, right? So there's a lot of good that can come to a community when a mining operation in the area has that needed support to make that change. And I think actually the Gualconda mine is a really great example of that. So that's part of Christina's Better Without Mercury project that I'll let her kind of dive into a little deeper.
Thanks, Anna. It's a great preface to know that we're, when you make a decision in your supply chain to support gold coming from artisanal and small scale gold mining communities, you're in it to support a process of improvement. And this is, whether you're supporting miners who are at the very beginning of their effort, and have a lot of challenges ahead of them in terms of producing gold in a way that we would consider, super responsible, meaning they're not using mercury. There's no, no association with, with difficult governments or difficulty with corruption, or there's, active engagement in reducing other environmental impacts, et cetera. At the beginning of miners' processes of getting involved in this, some of those issues are in existence. And so the Better Without Mercury project, for example, takes place in Colombia, and the main cleanup process has occurred, but the project is ongoing because the miners there are turning their land into a teaching mine. That's kind of what they would ideally like to do with their site. And so when I say it's already cleaned up, it means that when I went to visit there, we had an incredible tour of the mining facility. But it quickly, I saw, out of the corner of my eye upon arrival, this very contaminated area. And you can tell because there was nothing growing there. The color of the soil was, a bright rusty orange. The pools of water were toxic colors, things that would make you uncomfortable. And at the end of the tour, the head miner, Roberto Alvarez, explained to us that this was the area that they had been processing their sands after they have an underground mine. And so after they would get the rocks out and crush them into small bits. They would process them with mercury, the way Anna was describing. The mercury grabs onto the gold particles, and some is left behind. And they additionally thought, as cyanide was becoming more known and accessible in their area, they thought, well, maybe there's still some gold in this pile of contaminated sands. Let's also process them with cyanide. Because of that reality that there's a mercury cyanide combination there, really the only option available to the miners and to us was to move the sand, the contaminated material, away from the Honda River, which is a small creek that rises and falls in water quantities depending on the season. But they built, through funding from donors through this program, many of them on this call today, we were able to move that contaminated material to a dry area of the mining concession and basically lock it in place. And it will be there forever, in perpetuity, stored in that site so that the mercury cannot find its way to the water systems. And so that might sound like a really complicated reality for some of you on the call. Like, is that what it means to engage with ASM? What I'm trying to explain is that by participating, you're part of the solution. So had there not been investment from the community to help the miners of the Wakonda mine do that activity, that material would still be sitting there. And so by purchasing ASM gold in this way, then there are opportunities to for the miners to, on an ongoing basis, improve their work. So today we wanted to introduce a new, fairly new project. It started in 2018, and we have, I'm excited, we have Rachel Brass, who's based in the UK, evening her time on a Friday. Thank you, Rachel. She is the director of market linkages and investment for the Zahabu Safi Clean Gold project. And this is a project that is managed by, well, it's funded by USAID, and it's managed by an organization called Global Communities, with a bunch of organizations sort of creating a consortium around that. So I'm going to introduce the jewelry community aspect of this, but first, Rachel, I wanted to see if you can pop on camera for a minute and introduce yourself. And if you want to just give the big picture of the project, it would be great.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I have been and listening to one or two of the living room sessions previously, and it's great to be part of it today, because I think they're fascinating, and it's a great opportunity to really get some of these conversations going, which, as Christina just said, they're so important. So yeah, USAID's Zahabu Safi Clean Gold project. Zahabu Safi means clean gold in Kiswahili, which is the local language in Eastern Congo, and it's really building on several other projects that have gone before, which have really focused on developing the capacity of the cooperatives to produce responsible gold. But what we've found looking at these previous projects is that often there wasn't a market for that gold. So what happens then is, when the donor funding dries up, everything falls by the wayside, and progress that has been made through the project doesn't necessarily last. So what we're trying to do with this project is create something that works for the whole supply chain. So it's still got the miners and the mining communities at its heart, but it also needs to work for the rest of the supply chain, for the refiners and for the jewelers, and ultimately for the consumers as well. Because if there isn't a market for responsible gold from Eastern Congo, then in the legitimate market, then the miners are going to keep doing what they're currently doing, which is mining gold in very, very difficult conditions and selling that through illicit channels, smuggling it out of the country, which means that revenues don't come back to the country and don't benefit the communities as much as they should do. Because obviously this gold is, it's Congolese gold. It's the people that live on that land need to benefit from that ultimately. So in short, what we're doing as a project is we have three objectives. The first is creating the market, creating the demand for that gold, and that's where Levin Sources comes in. We're looking at working with refiners and jewelers, working closely with Christina to do that, to break down some of the myths that exist, and to handhold the organisations who might want to buy gold, to help them overcome the barriers that exist to buying gold from Congo. And we did a very in-depth market analysis right at the beginning of the project. Some of you may have seen that. I'll send a link shortly to that once I've stopped speaking, but it's worth at least reading an executive summary of that. It sort of sets out what those barriers are and how we think we need to overcome them. So our role, as I say, is creating the market, holding the hands of those who have felt too nervous in the past to invest in Congolese gold, but who do want to make a difference. The second objective is to increase the supply, and this is where our partners in Congo come in, and this bit is led by Global Communities, the main implementing partner for the project, a US NGO, who have lots of experience in working with cooperatives and in development. So they are hand in hand with two due diligence partners, helping the cooperatives build their capacity to be able to produce gold to the standards that we would expect to see from an OECD or an LBMA or a RMI perspective. So any of those well-known, accepted international standards. And then the third objective is to help those cooperatives become commercially viable entities in their own right, in a responsible context. So of course these miners, they're really savvy. They know what they're doing. They know how to build a business, and they wouldn't be doing that, most of them, if they didn't understand the context they were working in and understand how to trade gold, but doing that in a responsible way, in a way that can really benefit them fully and benefit their communities is a whole different ball game. So that is where our support comes in as well. So those three things together, we hope will create a system which people want to invest in, which the refiners and other organizations want to invest in. They want to learn more about and feel comfortable eventually buying gold from these supply chains that we're supporting. I'll leave it there, unless if there's any particular area that, Christina, that you want me to do a little bit more talking on.
I would actually love if you could explain a little more. So here's the context for everyone, and then maybe you can give some specifics, Rachel.
Yeah.
So if you imagine there are people mining for gold with their bare hands and rudimentary tools right now. There are people mining for gold right now with pneumatic hammers in underground tunnels that they carved with their own hands. There are people mining right now. We're getting bigger, they're actually using some explosives to make their holes. They are, they have tumblers and ball mills to crush the ore in a more efficient way. It keeps going until you get to, fairly mechanized operations that still fit in, again, within this artisanal and small scale gold mining segment of the gold mining industry. And so if you imagine those that are sort of in the, perhaps, I don't know, sometimes I don't want to describe it this way, but just to communicate, sometimes in the most desperate of conditions, right? So you have, in a way, the largest group of these artisanal miners are those in some of the most difficult circumstances, no matter where they are in the world. What the majority of these international programs and projects are trying to do is enable miners to also shift from that place of being really vulnerable and potentially exploited, et cetera, into improving their practices so they can move into places where they are benefiting better, polluting the environment less, and having fewer of the challenges such as child labor, for instance, in their mine sites, moving their way kind of through the pyramid, improving. So we later on in the conversation, we have Jonathan, who's on from Fair Mind and the Alliance for Responsible Mining. The miners that are achieving Fair Mind certification are in a different space than the miners that Rachel is talking about. So Rachel, can you explain what is meant by due diligence and what in particular, so in the case of Zahabu Safi, there are sites where for the time being, we're saying this gold isn't going to be exported yet in these formal channels. Here is why, and here's what we're doing to address the issues in a way that works for the communities and the people. So give us sort of a little bit of the context of a due diligence model versus a certification model.
Okay, yeah, well, so you're right, Christina, these are starting from a much more basic starting point. Most of the miners that we're talking about are digging with shovels. They don't have any protective gear, and it's very basic conditions, especially the new sites where there is often a gold rush to come to dig, where a new deposit has been found, and you find it's really chaotic, and the government is only really starting to get a grip on some of these sites now, even though it's been 20 odd years since the end of nearly 20 years since the end of the war. It's because it's such a huge country, the roads don't exist. A lot of these mines are a long way from main cities and a long way from any airports. So just getting there, can even involve walking, motorbikes and walking at best. So managing the sites is really difficult from a government perspective. But the government has got a really strong mining code, and they've got a strong set of local authorities who are starting to get a better grip on the wide sites, with help from the international community, from the UN, and from the regional bodies as well, and from NGOs. So these miners that we're working with, often there are military, well, the miners that are working in Eastern DRC, often there are military presence on site. Sometimes that is unfortunately Congolese military, like official military that shouldn't be there. The Congolese mining code says there shouldn't be any military presence on site. Sometimes they're rebels, as they're known in Congo, so armed groups that are benefiting from access to those minerals and making money from those minerals. And sometimes those they might not be present on site, but they'd be making illegal tax from the trade, from the minerals that are leaving the site. There's an awful lot of child labour in general in Eastern DRC because the school system still is not strong, and levels of poverty are very high, and parents often feel that they need to bring in extra income to be able to feed their children rather than send them to school. So a lot of child labour. And as Christine has already talked about in detail, mercury usage to extract the gold. So all of those 4 things that I've just mentioned are red flags for the OECD and OECD guidelines. And if those are present on site, gold exported from that site would not be classed as responsible from our perspective, and most of the legitimate market would be very nervous about buying that gold. So what we are doing with the sites that we've been working with is going through a process of identifying where those risks are present. So we have 2 different due diligence partners working in the different regions in Eastern Congo, one up in Ituri in the north, and another partner working in South Kivu and Maniema, slightly further south. And they offer, they basically have monitors on the mine site looking on a daily basis at what's going on those mine sites. We've done supply chain evaluations, which is a baseline assessments of what the mining operation looks like and what the supply chain looks like. We've assessed what those risks from each of those sites are, and we've worked out what needs to happen to mitigate those risks. There have been a couple of sites where it's usually often where the production levels are highest, the risks are also highest, because that's where people really want to get involved more. There tends to be more political involvement, in inverted commas, and difficult challenges at the sites with the highest levels of production, because they tend to be just much harder to manage, because everybody wants to have a piece of the action. So there's a couple of sites where we would love to be able to support the export of gold, but we don't think we can at the moment because the risks are too high. But we have partners there who are continuing to work with those sites and try and address those risks. And if they get to the stage where it's manageable, that those risks we feel have been mitigated to a certain level, then we will be able to re-engage with them directly. But as Christina said at the beginning, the point is, what we don't want to do is exclude the sites where the problems exist altogether, because that doesn't help anybody. It pushes the sites further away, and the cooperatives and the miners further away from the legitimate market. It pushes them further away from the possibility of getting external support, whether that's through an NGO or through a project like ours, which is more market-led and encouraging private sector investment. And it means that it's going to be much harder for them ever to be able to work with the responsible, the benefits that come with working with a responsible market. So really what we need to do is help these sites identify the risks, bring in the support that they need. Sometimes that will be directly from the project, sometimes that will be through leveraging other support from elsewhere, through NGOs, like UNICEF. In the case of child labour, we're working with UNICEF in one of our sites and helping those sites get support to address the risks and reduce for example, reduce child labour, so that it allows them to be part of the legitimate market and all the benefits that come with that, and hopefully the business, the money that flows, and the support and the transparency that comes with all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot. Thank you for sharing that. It's a lot, and that it's there's still so much work to be done, right? And really appreciating what you're sharing, Rachel. You're giving us a level of insight that just doesn't get spoken about very often.
Yeah, and maybe should I just maybe one more minute on one site in particular that we because we had some partners out in Eastern Congo this week, and some of you may have been at a webinar we organized to get direct sort of feedback from the cooperatives and the partners at that site who went to that site on Tuesday. And so it's down in South Kivu. It's a new site. It's quite it's close to Bukavu, the main city in South Kivu, which means everybody rushed there when gold deposits were found. It was very chaotic to start with, and the local government had to work very hard to bring some order to it. We've got agreements with 2 cooperatives there who we're supporting to build their own structures as cooperatives and to help them tackle some of the risks that we found that they have, mostly child labor and a little bit of mercury usage. And we have the president of one of the cooperatives is a really fascinating woman who's a doctor and she's very charismatic, and she has she's worked closely with the government. She's worked with us and out the monitoring team of the due diligence partner, and they've really started to tackle the risks that were there. So they're working with UNICEF on child labor, and they've worked to get a traceability system in place, so which fits in with the Congolese government scheme, so that the gold, when it exports, will be in line with all the Congolese requirements as well. And we think that they're really quite close now to being able to make an export of gold, maybe even by the end of the year. So that's been quite exciting because they've really started from scratch, and they've been really exciting partners in the last few months, the last year, I guess. So yeah, so we're getting to the stage where it feels possible after 3 years of very hard work and analysis and trying to really understand the market and the realities of things in Congo.
Yeah, and you know quite well, having spent significant amounts of time in country over the course of your professional life. So what it's for all of you, Rachel, Rachel's background is impressive, and and we'll have you on in the future, to talk about some of those other experiences in time, but really glad that you could join today. And so I thought I would also take this opportunity to let everyone here on the call know, some of you are quite involved in this already, but what our consultancy is doing in support of this project is building, helping to build a community of jewelers of all shapes, sizes, scale, etc., who are interested in staying up to date on what's happening, but also sharing expertise. There is a point in time where this is going to become something that we need to lend not just our purchasing power to, but also ideas on how to market this, how to kind of bring it out into the world in a creative way. And so if you haven't yet received emails or heard about the jewelry community, the Zahabu Safi jewelry community, and you want to participate in this after you're hearing what Rachel is telling you, please put your name in the chat, and we'll follow up with you. We've only had 2 meetings so far, so there's no being behind, really. The first meeting was just a general kind of raising awareness with jewelers about the topic. Jewelers are involved all over the world, primarily US, UK, and Europe. And Additionally, this meeting that Rachel referred to just happened earlier this week. And what we were able to do is have a meeting that happened in the DRC. We were able to broadcast it out, and it was members of the cooperatives, one of the trading partners, one jeweler who Anna will tell you about maybe a little bit as part of the next topic in this conversation. And we heard from global communities, et cetera. So it was a really interesting opportunity where we were able to bring what was happening in the field in real time to jewelers everywhere else in the world. You know, not everyone can travel to location. And I know that, you know, Fairmind is on this program too. Fairmind has also done a really great job in making sites and mining communities available to interested jewelers. So it's something that you know, you don't have to necessarily participate in this from a distance. You can get as up close as you'd really kind of like to be, or that you can tolerate. So if you're interested, please send me your emails, and I will follow up when we have our next meeting. So we want to segue next into the next part of our conversation today. And Rachel, you might have some things you want to share. Don't feel like you have to stay on camera if you don't want to. You know, it's just, you might have some things that you want to contribute to this thinking. But what we've been most familiar with in this space is fair trade and Fairmind material, largely coming from Latin America, but also coming from places like Mongolia. We are in a point where there is growing awareness of the fact that gold is coming from artisanal and small-scale gold mining communities, that these communities require the support of the jewelry industry. But to date, the awareness of consumers is still really limited in these materials. They're not aware that they could make a choice in their gold purchasing that works to improve the environment in a way that they may never have imagined. That by engaging in newly mined material in artisanal sites, you can actually play a direct role in improving environmental aspects at those mine sites. You can support people, you can support schools, etc. So I'm turning it over now to a subcommittee within the organization Ethical Metalsmiths, and it's called the Ethical Metalsmiths Action Coalition. And well, I'm going to hand it over to Anna and others to introduce it so that we can have a conversation about supporting ASM Gold collectively.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. Okay, I'm going to do a screen share and just pull up a little casual presentation to share about the project with y'all. Let's see. How's that looking? Okay, and then let me try this fancy view out. Okay, does that look good? Okay, awesome. So, I want to tell you today about the Beyond Recycled Gold campaign, which is a consumer awareness project. So as Christina mentioned, this was a project that was born out of the Ethical Metalsmiths Action Coalition. Most of the team is here right now. So we are currently myself, Jessica, Will, Alyssa, Samantha, and Kyle. Christina kind of alluded to one jeweler who was present in the DRC for some of the current meetings happening, and that's Kyle. So he's currently on a flight coming back from the DRC. We're really excited to have his direct insight into the project there. But yeah, so we're a small group of volunteers, industry participants, mostly jewelers, who have come together to work on this project to raise consumer awareness. We're definitely welcoming of anyone who would like to contribute to the project, But I would also note that Ethical Metalsmiths, the Action Coalition, is a really great place to connect with other people working on any initiatives in the industry or get support in starting your own projects. So great resource there. So the main goal of this project is to use cohesive language to promote awareness and basically encourage more consumers to ask for ASGM products. And our vision is basically to make it easy for jewelers and retailers and anyone to share information with customers and clients. So we're looking at kind of taking all of this existing knowledge in the industry in awesome community circles like this one and turning it into open source, consumer friendly messaging. So we want to create educational content that is free and open for anyone to use, really easy to share, and hopefully it's an asset to jewelers and businesses as well. We would approach this by creating first a consumer guide that would be a downloadable PDF that is kind of a more comprehensive guide on how to shop responsibly, how to what questions to ask about how gold is sourced, things like that. We would also include, infographics, terminology, case studies. We would love to tell direct stories of miners and how, supporting ASGM helps support their communities. And we just want to make all of these things, all of this content easy for everyone to share and to continue to spread the word in a grassroots movement kind of way. So let's see. Our target audience is definitely starting out with sustainably minded jewelry consumers, people who are already on the lookout for this type of information, but maybe, they're a little bogged down by the greenwashing out there. Maybe they just haven't had the time to fully research all of this. We know that it takes a lot of time to really get down to the bottom of all the questions to ask to get the right answers. So we would then expand into a more general jewelry market and hopefully employ the use of different types of media and influencers, anyone who could continue to spread the word. We want to keep the feeling of the campaign really positive. So, it's all about empowering consumers to see the positive choice they can make and vote with their dollars for something beneficial, and tell direct stories. Just keep it really sincere and concise, hopeful. We would focus on pretty introductory level information, but really clear facts, right, to help people navigate marketing claims that are out there. We want to highlight the possibility for doing good with the buying choices that people make. And we're calling the project currently Beyond Recycled Gold because we're approaching this looking at the conversation around recycled gold as an opportunity to kind of dispel some misinformation that might be out there and use that as a way to lead back to supporting ASGM. We know that the conversation around recycled gold is often, oh, there's enough gold above ground, so using recycled means we don't add to the destruction of the earth. However, we don't actually see proof that there is any impact on the demand for newly mined gold by using recycled gold, right? So, but that's something that a lot of consumers aren't aware of. And we're hoping to really use that to propel the conversation toward supporting ASGM. So yeah, our next steps are content creation. We would love to gather feedback from anybody here or anyone in the future and kind of build upon that. And we're looking for collaborators. So specifically, if you have copywriting, graphic design, marketing, social media or otherwise, or journalism expertise or skills, and would like to contribute to the project, we would love to get in touch with you. I'll drop a little link to a project outline PDF in the chat, and that includes our contact info. But you can also feel free to just drop your email in the chat right now, and we'll reach out to you as well. So that is, I'm going to stop that share. So that's kind of the gist and the overview of the project. Like I said, we have some of our awesome team members here who I'm sure would be happy to jump on and maybe add anything else or you know, help answer any questions y'all would have.
So one of the questions is that's come in already is whether or not this group has funding secured for to build this initiative.
Unfortunately, no. This is currently purely a volunteer initiative. We would definitely welcome, you know, ideas on that. So.
Okay, it looks like Brandy Dallow is chatting. Thanks, Brandy, commenting on interest in maybe helping to brainstorm, you know, or kind of figure some things out. So we'll circle back around. You know, the group will be able to circle back around. I know you all are in touch with each other. One of the things we wanted to do is kind of point to Fair Mind. Jonathan, I'm going to point to you for a second. Fair Mind has done a pretty good job, like over the years, going from this grassroots thing, a little bit like where Zahabu Safi is right now in terms of community engagement, to something now where, you know, when you talk with jewelers, they feel generally quite supported in the marketing materials that Fair Mind makes accessible. So, you know, Jonathan, I was wondering if you would pop on and talk about some of the materials that you provide. And, you know, when you've gotten feedback from the jewelry community, are there materials or ways of communicating that you think could be successful on, you know, not necessarily Fair Mind specific, but if we had this broad campaign around artisanal and small scale gold mining? So I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if you're available. Hey,
I'm here. Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah,
sorry, I'm
right.
at Starbucks because I had to move from my house. So thank you so much for your question, and it's great to say hi to all of you. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge to think of all of these materials to educate on artisanal small scale mining. So yes, we know that when it comes to marketing and digital marketing, content is king. So blog entries, webinars, interviews. I interviewed you once, I remember. So all of this content creation is really important, but I know that we all have limited resources. So sometimes we would like to do more than what we are actually capable of. So it will be great to join forces, because actually we are thinking, because we've been talking directly to jewelry brands, but now we want to talk directly also to consumers. And we started by developing a website for consumers, but we still need to, you know, strengthen that. So we really need to come together to educate the consumers, as you said. Right now, Fair Mind materials, well, we have a press kit and we have different materials that we offer to the licensed brands. So catalogs and pictures of the artisanal small scale mining communities we work with. So yeah, so if if any of you need any material, or we can sit down and talk about how to create content together, just let us know, and we'd be happy to collaborate, of course.
Jonathan, thank you so much. That's wonderful.
I was actually writing an email to you right now, so wait for it.
Great.
At this point, if you'd like to pop in with comments, please just chat, submit into the chat, and I'm trying to see if he's available. Bob, you're available for a minute? Okay, so before we just kind of open up and start answering some of the questions in the chat, I was really hoping that we could hear from a retailer. So we hear Fairmind talking about, we've done direct marketing to jewelers to get them interested in becoming licensees and supporting Fairmind Gold, supporting responsible artisanal and small scale, gold coming from artisanal and small scale mines. Bob has been sort of our retailer in-house on these living room sessions. Being a retailer is a different way of thinking than being a jeweler, and so Bob, if you could just share a little bit, if imagine that a campaign like this is successful, right? And you would measure that success by your customers' response. What would that look like? What do you think you would need to have customers walking in the door of your store asking for responsible, artisanally mined gold?
So there's background noise because we've actually got two designers in the store right now,
Very
Judy
exciting.
Powers and Russell Jones, who are doing an event. That's why I've been popping back and forth.
Yeah.
And I am getting grief from my wife, Rosemary, as to why I'm not out there. And in fact, I've been messaging back to Monica that Russell brought 3 pieces of jewelry that the 3, Anza, Robert Goodman Jewelers, and Russell have been collaborating on. She's done proprietary custom cuts for Russell that are tablet cuts, double tablet cuts, and 2 other stones that have been put of theirs that are Moyo, so they're direct source. We know who the cutter is. They're 100% transparent and traceable. And they're wherever gold is used, it's all fair mine. And another thing I can tell you is I just received my 3rd quarter social media statistics. And for the first time since we've been doing this over the last 3.5, 4, or 5 years, whatever the hell it is, sustainable marketing that they've been doing for us has exceeded engagement ring marketing. Now that may be that the engagement ring marketing has become stale, or it may be that we're starting to see traction. So this is a very doable thing, and it's not something that's out there on the horizon. It's here, it's now. The customers are there and they're interested in it. And getting more help in terms of marketing materials means a lot to small retailers like us. But for me, and Judy and I had dinner last night when she got in and we were talking about this. For me, for Rosemary and I, it's critical that as this stuff is made available, it's got to be created so that people who are greenwashing can't use it. That we use words like traceable and transparent, because as soon as you use the word transparent, people who are bullshitting their customers are going to be exposed. And I'm not sure if I'm answering Christina's question. I'm not sure if I'm saying what you want, what you're looking for.
It's never, don't say what I want you to say.
I don't know if the badum, if this is what I'm supposed to be saying.
Yeah,
But this is all very important to get these initiatives are all very important to people like us who are not single designer retailers. We are, we're representing a number of designers, and a number of them are working with transparency, traceable and transparent. it's important that we, the retailers, push you all to provide more and more and more information.
Thanks. That's the responsibility there of the jeweler to kind of provide as much information as possible to the extent that it's available, right? So in a way, you know, this is what's so interesting, kind of working on the spectrum of these is kind of what we're seeing emerge informationally from Zahabu Safi, the increasing communications from Fairmind. We're starting to have access to more and more information on these topics. So there are a ton of questions coming in. One is particularly intriguing, and even though it's and I hope it doesn't bother you, it's a little bit of a segue away from the conversation. We'll come back, but Russell Larman is asking a really interesting question, and I'll ask it, but I'll put it to Rachel because she might be able to respond better than I. And the premise is, in his words, with homicides of environmental activists at an annual record high in 2020, which is tragic, who is putting their lives on the line to implement and negotiate changes at the mining sites? So what's the risk to the leaders, you know, who are working on this?
Well, I can only speak really in the context of what we're doing in Congo through Zahabu Safi, and I think it's you're right. It's tragic that this is the case, but it's a reality, and it's especially when we're talking minerals like gold, where the stakes are so high in terms of the money, but also in terms of the politics that are associated with it. So we are really conscious when we're working at the sites of the additional risk we could be putting people under just by partnering with them. This is what I suppose it's what happens in many places when international NGOs, for example, international companies come in, it can raise the stakes even higher. So global communities, the main implementing partner, do have their processes in place to assess those risks and to make sure that what we're doing isn't putting people at exposing them any more than they need to be. What I've found working in DRC previously, and certainly I have this sense from the cooperative leaders that we've been working with, they're all pretty savvy. They know the risks themselves. They know how the risks change when they change their supply chains, and of course disrupting an existing supply chain which maybe has been in place for years, with certain people benefiting directly from it, certain powerful people directly from it. And you know, we come in and encourage people to send the gold out in a different way, and those people suddenly lose access to that income. Yeah, it's a dangerous game. So we've done a political economy analysis, which is a bit boring and processy, but really important to understand those supply chain dynamics, and to understand who the key players are in each supply chain, and then we have to work out what happens if those key players are cut out. That's why it's really important that we work with the local authorities in each of the provinces, because they have the ability to secure the mine sites, or to support the activities of the miners. So we're really conscious of it. It's a it's one of the biggest risks of the project, and well, reputationally in general, but obviously it's people's lives that we're talking about, so it's something that we take really, really seriously.
Russell, do you have any follow-up question for Rachel on that? I'm looking for you.
I don't.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's sort of the interesting thing working with a team like Global Communities and USAID. You get to see the behind the scenes on how high impact projects like this work. And the security considerations are robust. It's not easy. And you know, a lot of this work is also happening in Latin America. It's especially high risk in the Amazon rainforest. So it is important for everyone to recognize, you know, sometimes we tend to over glorify our goodness in supporting artisanal and small scale gold mining. And it's important to keep in mind that it is a really controversial material. You know, it is not without its impacts. And I appreciate, Russell, that you brought that into our reality for this conversation. Thanks for doing that. I'm curious for some of the other folks on the Ethical Metalsmiths Action Committee, is there something you want to find out from the audience in particular? Like, is there something that jewelers feel like they would really need to be able to promote their commitment to artisanal and small scale gold mining, you know, in their practice? Like, we could use, you know, a bit of time right now brainstorming together what kinds of materials, documents, concepts would be really useful for this group. So Will, I don't know if you want to hop on and maybe you want to just say some of the things that have worked for you and ask for feedback. Just want to make the channel open for all of you working on this project to get the feedback that would be helpful so that this open source idea can come to life.
Yeah,
Sure.
Will or Sam, Alyssa, y'all feel free to chime in whatever thoughts you have and questions.
Cool. I can chat briefly. Yeah, just I'm loving the conversation and all the thoughts in the chat already. It's like such a stimulating. Yeah, I'm always just humbled by the enthusiasm of the group. So thank you, everybody. I guess I'm curious, or something that we've talked a lot about and brainstormed about is like kind of what resources would be helpful. So I think it'd be helpful to hear from other jewelers, designers, retailers, like all of you. What are the biggest like friction points that you find when thinking about how to source things or how to kind of present the sustainable work? Sustainable being the truest word or form of that, not the greenwashing. So yeah, just kind of curious about people's friction points there and what, like, as an open source model and as we build out templates and kind of like thinking about this awareness things, how can we like help solve those kind of to scale it for more people, so it's not just all of us trying to get stuck with all those things.
Yeah, and please feel free to get specific, because we're actually trying to develop materials that can be uploaded, whether it's in your newsletter or some sort of microsite that can be linked from your product page, or really like where is the actual place where as a retailer or a jeweler you would use this consumer facing information so that we can design it and create it with that in mind.
So we would use it on social media primarily. And we would also use it as talking points. We're unusual because we don't have any salespeople, so we don't have any, the only people we have to train is ourselves. So from our point of view, things that can be used on social media. are going to be the most effective.
Do you find that y'all like to share like an infographic, something that's a little more text heavy or more image based? Do you find that one gets a better reaction from your followers? Or
things that are conversational are by far that are conversational and that are personal. I don't think, you know, people are getting infographics and all that junk from all over the place, and they're they kind of are. If I see that kind of stuff, I'm going to look and think, you know, what are the sources? Is it reliable? Is it real information? Is it bogus information? I think the more personal and the more real world, as if you're just sitting there talking to somebody about it, is way more effective than the other stuff. You know?
awesome, thanks.
I have a question to everyone. One of the things I'm wondering about with the approach is whether or not beyond recycled is necessarily the best approach. In the sense that while recycled gold is sort of it is the natural reaction. When people hear about issues in the gold supply chain, the very first reaction is always to recycle gold. But last year, when we got the results in from our very first consumer research study on awareness of artisanal gold in the supply chain, we also polled that audience. It was over 1,000 consumers participated in it. And even there, the awareness that the jewelry they were purchasing could have been made from recycled gold was unknown to them. It was not necessarily something that they were aware of. So it may be that there is, you know, you are all educating yourselves, you're making decisions about how you want to purchase your gold, how you want to influence the jewelry industry through your purchase, how you want to impact people all along the supply chain with your purchases. So the recycled gold might be an interesting, you know, conceptual starting point. I don't know that the point it needs to be a differentiator necessarily, because there isn't that much information out there on recycled gold to the general consumer. Yes, we see claims being made by jewelers all over the place on social media. We see those claims about recycled content, but is that in the mind of the consumer? Based on what we found, not so much. So something to consider.
That's something, Christina, I would definitely chat with you more about. I think we're at the very beginnings, right? We're definitely open to even calling this something else. I think we started off with that as we're all a little frustrated with the greenwashing that happens around recycled gold. And so even if that becomes a smaller part of the project, I think we do want to, at the same time as we educate about ASGM, we want to also dispel this idea that using recycled decreases the demand for newly mined gold, right? But yeah, I would love to hear any other thoughts on that as well.
Jonathan is adding some helpful things to the chat, lots of invitations to collaborate, and also kind of links to see if the messages in those links resonate. It would be interesting how many, you know, you can just put like me in the chat, but how many of you are already incorporating information about artisanally and about gold from artisanal and small scale mines in your communications? Several of you are. And is it specific to the brand like Fair Mind or Fair Trade, or is it general information about ASGM. Got it. Okay, because some of you are also, I'm just reading the chat while I'm talking here, because some of you are also using gemstones. Diamonds is a much more complicated story in this space, but gemstones are majority, by majority mined artisanally. And so this fits into the story there too. Is the idea that this would be about ASM generally, not just gold? So gemstones and precious metals?
I think we're starting with gold as it feels a little more manageable. I don't know, what did the rest of y'all think? I think we've talked a little bit about like, yes, this could grow into more.
From a marketing point of view, you have to include everything. Because if you're just talking about gold, but the gold has a gemstone in it, and you go, oh, well, I got this from a mine where they whip the kids till they're bloody, and we pay them in small porridge portions. It's not relevant, right? So it's an entire package. It's not parts of it and small baby steps. Because if you take all small baby steps, it's going to take generations.
Sam, did you want to add something?
Yeah, well, definitely we were starting at gold just because we are such a small group and, no funding, et cetera. But also I think the main goal is to kind of penetrate that consumer awareness bubble that hasn't yet, as Christina mentioned, quite happened yet, like it has with, for example, the fashion industry, with the coffee industry, where people are really aware that every time they make a purchase, they are making a big decision that's sort of a human rights decision and where they're going to fall within that spectrum for their own values. Jewelry hasn't quite hit that place in most people's brains yet. And so I think the main goal of this awareness campaign is to just get that on the map, wherever that might be. And it does seem like recycled is doing the best job within jewelry of kind of like landing, even though that's only a part of the story. It's a pretty easy story and that works well for consumers. So I think it's leveraging, what little momentum that might be there in the recycled narrative, lift that up and use that, but expand on that and not stop expanding on that just within the gold space, but, of course, continue to gemstones, all the supply chain, really focusing on miners at a certain point, having things be more interactive. But before things are fleshed out, even saying, hey, this is a huge story. We're chipping away at it. That's part of being transparent as well, as saying, we're starting here. There's so much to do. This is our journey.
Yeah, definitely. You put that really well, Sam. And that's what I have in mind too. And I know our small group is very good at communicating our goals and how much we're putting into it. I just didn't want to commit everybody to like how long-term of a project this is. So we're definitely seeing this as a starting point. And yeah, hoping to continue.
So there's a question that is coming in that might help everyone who is considering working with Fair Mine Gold. Some specifics about how you can stamp it depending on how you're using it. So Jonathan, do you want to pop on an answer, or I can give it my best attempt? Is he still on? There he is.
Yeah, so, well, to answer, the short answer to that question specifically as to how to stamp or how to make sure that the gold is actually fair mined is, well, we offer a sourcing model called labeled sourcing model, in which, depending on the supplier you decide to work with, you can stamp the fair mined hallmark, for example. But all of those questions can be directed to info@fairmine.org or my email. It's right there on the chat box, because it's not only that, but also everything that entails being a licensed brand or having a license for your brand. So we'll be happy to support with that and some other questions if you want to start the journey to become a permanent licensed brand.
Yeah, so to add to that, there are rules about so alloying is fine. It's the percentage of gold like per finished object before it's stamped that is where there are rules around the licensing if you want to make fair mine claims. So I think we dropped, here's also the email that Jonathan was referring to. When you reach out to Fairmine for information about the certification and the licensing procedures for jewelers, they go about it in a really nice way. And like first is trying to figure out what's the nature of your business. Do you already have suppliers in line? You know, where you would know where you could purchase material from, so that the decision to become a licensee and understanding where you might be getting your materials from, et cetera, it helps the Fairmine team understands the ecosystem that jewelers are working in. At this point, they know who all the suppliers are of Fairmine gold to jewelers. So they can help you figure out to like where you're going to get the material, understanding the rules of what you're signing up for when you become a licensee. Becoming a licensee gives you some privileges that just purchasing Fairmine gold and then not telling anyone about it because you want to support the initiative, but you don't necessarily want to claim it is different. So if you want to be a licensee and stamp your material and shout about it, then there are rules that have to be followed in that process. So they have some really useful documents that kind of walk you through the considerations to make in that process. And I know, Russell, sometimes you're asking for in an educational context, you know, where you have students at a university that are, or at an educational program that you're interested in bringing, you know, artisanally mined gold into that educational environment. That's a really specific question that, you know, a group of us could work through and problem solve together, because it's not, and there might be other educational institutions that are interested in something similar. So it's worth asking about further. So there are more questions about DRC. Rachel, are you still, would you like to pop on one more time? There are some questions that are coming up. Or if you're, Rachel, if you're still available, you could just signal that by unmuting and then I'll know if you're there or not. If not, it's okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So Christina Mall, if you wouldn't mind asking, just ask your question directly of Rachel. It's nice to hear more voices if you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, no, I just had a couple of questions, but it seems like one might be better for another day. And this has been absolutely fantastic. Like all the living rooms, I'm learning so much. So thank you all for doing this. But yeah, so I think my more recent question was just that you know, how do we help educate people? Because some people say, especially young people in their 20s, my kids, for example, I just won't buy anything that's mined. It seems like such a fallacy because, first of all, if you have a phone, you're already part of this whole system. And I think personally in the global north, we're all consuming gold, whether we know it or not, directly or indirectly. So yeah, so how do we help communicate that some people actually do want to mine? They just want to be paid fairly and work safely, which is, of course, totally understandable. But challenging to communicate, you know, to people who like to think they're not contributing to actual mining.
Yeah, I totally agree, Christina. I'm not sure I'm necessarily the best person to answer that. Somebody like Estelle, Estelle Levin would be excellent to answer that question. She's thought about this every day for the last 20 odd years. But I mean, I answered some of that, I think in the chat. You're absolutely right that certainly in DRC, even though the conditions are really difficult when mining and lives are risked going down mines every day, the income that you can make from mining, if you're a bit lucky, is significantly higher than it would be if you were doing agriculture in most of the Eastern DRC, which isn't particularly profitable. It's subsistence agriculture, and there aren't many other livelihoods that are offering themselves in these remote parts of Eastern DRC with limited infrastructure. So at this point in time, there's a demand for the gold, and people see an opportunity to make money out of it, so they are choosing to mine. Not everybody, some are forced into it, but most people will be in Eastern DRC at the moment, I think, are choosing it. But that doesn't make it a good experience, right? As I said at the beginning, and as Christina's already mentioned, no protective kit, long hours, back-breaking work, and the potentially working with mercury, pit collapses, flooding, all sorts. It's I think that what we need to do is communicate that it is a nuanced issue, right? There's no clear-cut answers to any of these questions. We've got to communicate that it's never going to be perfect, but what we do know is by cutting ASM miners out of the equation altogether, you force them into an illicit trade, and they don't get the support, or the regular income, or the ability to improve their living conditions and their working conditions. So the best thing we can do is to engage, listen to them, listen to what they want, listen to what they need, and partner with them. And that's what we're trying to do with Zahabu Safi. Not easy, and it won't be perfect, but it's better than cutting them out of the system altogether, in my opinion.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's kind of the perfect note to end on as we wrap up this October living room session. We're going to return to this topic next month, again on November 19th. And please reach out if you want to hear from, as I said at the top of the conversation, a particular initiative, or you want to know more about what's happening in a particular country. Some of you might be interested in what's happening in the Madre de Dios region of Peru. In the US, the work of Pure Earth has been in everyone's consciousness most recently because jewelers have contributed and donated jewelry made with fair mine gold to that project. And it also highlighted the work of a particular miner leading a community in both mercury-free mining initiatives and the restoration of the land there, based on, in collaboration with Cincia, which is a scientific research organization on, one of the things they do is tackling how do you reforest land that's been entirely decimated by gold mining, meaning the soil has nothing left to give in terms of reforesting and so on. So there's research going on how that kind of return of the ecosystem can be done in the end. So in all of this thinking is, the engage to improve concept in terms of communicating with younger people and wondering why it is that we do that, and that appetite for complexity that we're trying to all harness is paramount in the communication, and to be able to show that, look, it's by engaging that we're actually reducing the use of mercury. Look, it's by engaging that we're actually mandating replanting of forests post-mining activity. Look, it's actually in engaging where the communities are benefiting more directly from the mining than they were before. It's actually through engage. So it's like the answer to that question can be articulated in a variety of ways, but participation at this point in time is critical. Yes, there will be those that say no more gold. I don't want to buy any. I'm done. I'm not going to support this anymore. That's a choice that they're going to make. And they have that choice in some regards is important too, and supported. So anyway, I appreciate this conversation very much. I want to say a very special thank you to Anna for preparing the presentation for the Ethical Metalsmiths Action Coalition, for the rest of the coalition. Thanks for joining. For Jonathan from Fair Mind, thank you so much for coming on and giving time. Bob, thank you. We always put you in the hot seat on these conversations for the retailer perspective. And Rachel, really just super grateful that you spent your Friday evening with us. It's hard for us to understand, I'm here on the East Coast, it's 1:30 in the afternoon, but you've given your Friday in a really generous way, and we're super grateful. We all learned a lot.
Thanks. It's been a really fascinating conversation. Thanks for letting me.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you. Take good care, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye.
seeing everyone.
I'm going to hit the button. Bye.